So welcome everyone. And before we start, although we may have already gathered, let's just invoke Mother's and Sri Aurobindo's presence before we start the reading for today. So today, I thought we can take it up from here. Monday, March 1, 1926. So yeah, let's go through. So there are three questions, one, two, three. We can actually go through them all at once. So if anyone would like to read the three questions and the responses, please go ahead.
Yes. Monday, March 1st, 1920. During the last week, there has been, during the last week, there has not been much progress. I can't manage to get out of my prison, and my mind doesn't want to yield. There are two inner movements which I practice successively. First, whilst keeping the mind as calm as possible, I try hard to open myself to a higher perception, to become aware of the supramental reality. The other is to detach my inner being from action and from the mental level, to establish myself, as we say, in the supramental region. Are these two movements both right? They seem to me to be two aspects, active and passive, of the same effort. But it is always with the mind that you make this effort. It is unavoidable in the beginning, but the calm which comes is not an effort, it is a substance, a mental stuff. I understand it mentally, but I do not yet realize it. I have always to make an effort, quite a strenuous one, for it takes up even my physical brain in which I feel it. When I lift this pressure, the waves resume their movement. I am also very easily disturbed by outside noises. Even when they don't start any thought in me, they draw my attention sharply, which gets riveted to them. You will feel them occurring somewhere in your widened consciousness, but without their disturbing you. Indeed, everything will seem to you as though outside you. That's my experience. When I began yoga, I came to an impasse, unable to go any further. My brother then directed me to Yogi Vishnu Bhaskar Lele, whom Sri Aurobindo met towards the end of 1907, who had certain powers. I remained with him 10 days. He told me to sit beside him and to drive away with deliberation any thought which would appear. I did it, and after 3 days, my mind was calm and peaceful, unchangeable. Thoughts floated before me, I saw them and was aware of them, but was no longer their toy. When I left, as I was the political leader, I was asked to make a speech somewhere. I refused, saying I hadn't a single thought in my head. But the yogi told me to go, for the thoughts would come of themselves. And it was true. So too, I had to write in the papers. And I went back home to Bengal. At several places I had to speak. And always the mental work was done of itself without my being its plaything in detachment and peace. This calm is at first mental. There are two parts in the mind, which one which reflects the activity of Prakriti, the other which shares the calm of Purusha. I understand quite clearly. The only result reached so far is more calmness and a deeper peace, less easily disturbed by the little things of life, more intuitiveness, and a greater facility in uniting myself with what is around me. This is already something important. Continue and develop also this feeling of union with nature which you have.
Yeah, thank you. So, yes, we can take if there are any reflections or thoughts.
I find many times in the conversations with Sri Aurobindo that he's very precise, asking questions, for example, about what is the nature of this peace you are feeling. It is mental, it is vital. He just tries to understand precisely what the experience is. And sometimes when I read this, I don't find easy to understand or to discriminate these things like, okay, I'm feeling some peace, some calmness. Is this of a mental nature? Is this vital? Is this? It's not always easy to understand this, to really get these points.
Sometimes the inventory of the mind. Sometimes, when there's a discussion happening and certain ideas come to the mind, which really feels unbelievable because to the mind there is no such thing in its inventory, but yet there is another inventory somewhere where all these things come from. Because in that passage where Sri Aurobindo felt he had nothing to talk in the speech, and yet the Guru told him to go ahead because I think there is another deeper inventory that is more resourceful and has more things to give out. Okay.
Yeah. Anything more here? Anyone, any reflections or thoughts to share? Any comments? So again, we have usually a kind of a habit that if we have to say design a plan of action or make a move or decide in our life, we think that it's only with logical thinking and analytical thinking and planning that we can find the way ahead. But here we see that there is also another possibility, the deeper inventory, what Jagan was sharing, that if we can quieten down our surface mind and just be a kind of a passive receptacle, then there is a possibility, and we all may have glimpses of that always, that there is a deeper knowledge that just knows and decides and gets things done. But slowly only we cultivate this, because in the beginning we don't have that much of surety that would it work, oh how could I not think and then things would get done, how, how is it possible? But it's only with our experiences that we grow. Like Sri Aurobindo shares here that in the beginning he thought that how can I speak when I don't have anything active going on in my mind. But then, as the yogi shared, Vishnu Bhaskar Lele, that just go, and the right thoughts and the words and whatever, they will just appear. So slowly only through our experiences we get to know that there is a different way of life possible, where this aggressive overactivity of mind, where usually we are puppeted around because of those thoughts and opinions and ideas, that is not necessary actually. So again, it's just very practical, and we all have to experience in our own life these things, and then we are convinced that these things work. Yeah. So it's kind of a different taste that we develop. Earlier, we have a taste of constant aggression and activation of the mind. Every time a chatter is going on in the backdrop, and that feels normal. But then we cultivate a new lifestyle where there's most often a kind of a silence, and then whenever something is required, the words emerge and the ideas are kind of received in that silence. So very practical. I don't know what else we can. So if there is anything, then you can share. Otherwise, we can go ahead. So you can go ahead. Yeah.
Today in the group, one shared a message by the mother. It was talking about how how total surrender is very important, and I think it really answers a beautiful question that like I think it's waking up. I think I have to remind myself to make sure that yes, that is what I have to do today to fully surrender, to fully keep faith. If surrender is a heavy word, then to have full faith in the mother, because every now and then, because of so many selves within talking and giving all these feedbacks, I kind of sometimes miss that point that I am being taken care, and then I try to take control, and then all these chaos comes into me. So that was a very beautiful message, and I sort of I'm able to relate with what we just read. Thank you.
Yeah. So let's take a few more passages here. We can take the first one. and then we see whether to continue or not, or take a pause. So, yeah, anyone would like to read? Monday, March 8th, 1926.
I'll read.
Yeah.
Monday, March 8th, 1926. This week there has not been much progress. My mind is sometimes tamasic, sometimes rajasic. At times, outside noises are the causes of difficulties. They resound with as much greater a force as my mind is more quiet and empty. What are your inner movements? Always, always the following two movements, either having quietened the mind to remain attentive to the influence from above, or to separate myself from the calmed mental being and try to realize my existence above the mind, as in the swift experience glimpsed by me once. If you succeed in shutting out all thoughts, in reaching absolute passiveness, three things in fact can happen. Either a profound calm descends and takes hold of one, or the consciousness separates from the outer world and attains another level, or lastly, the invasion of outside impressions becomes all powerful. And if the first two are not realized, the third in that case supervenes. Hence, the importance of making all quiet whilst remaining attentive to the higher influence, open towards the heights, so to say. So difficult, no? You understand it, but and maybe sometimes for few moments you are able to, really resonate and feel that, but it doesn't. मतलब वही है practice. It you really know this, but it's just that it doesn't stay.
Yeah. So Pavitrada is asking Sri Aurobindo, what are your inner movements? And he says that always the following two movements, either having quietened the mind to remain attentive to the influence from above. Now, as Shweta shared, that easier said than done. We may read about it again and again, but even then, from time to time, many other things become so important that we are not able to have that poise. We lose that poise that Sri Aurobindo talks about here, the inner poise. And I think that is the work of our life experiences, that slowly, gradually, through our life experiences, we truly become convinced that there is nothing really that we are going to get in the outward, giving so much focus on the outward. And of course, for practical purposes, the focus will be given. If you have to do work, the focus is given, but there is no demand from the outward. And then in the inner, a constant practice can go on. But at this state, that we want to stabilize that practice, and a continuous practice is going on within, irrespective of the outer situations. We don't reach this point very soon, usually in our lives, because always there is a glitter outside, and there is this restless, what Sri Aurobindo called psychic prana. It kind of comes out, goes out, and wants to have its fulfillment in the outside events. So, through our life experiences, if we have had enough of experiences which now make me convinced that there is nothing, there is no fulfillment I am ever going to get in the outward experiences, no matter how beautiful they may be. Lovely workplace, lovely relationships, meaningful work, in doing some things in the ashram, doesn't matter. There we can offer whatever we have to offer. But the true fulfillment always has to be found within. And slowly only we get convinced about this. and then we can not lax the inner practice, because usually what happens is that our inner practice gets laxed from time to time. We become lazy there, and very soon what happens that the focus is outside and we have lost the inner touch. It happens with us, for a very, very long time. It keeps on happening, kind of pendulum like movement. So only slowly, gradually, through all the life experiences, the sufferings, the blows, the challenges, the difficult times, I think there comes a time when we realize that no matter how beautiful a place is where I may go and stay and do the retreat, no matter how beautiful a relationship is, no matter how beautiful the work and the everything is going around, my true fulfillment does not ever depend on the outer circumstances. It can never, because that is not the design. And then a continuous inner poise can be maintained, because that is crucial for my existence. I want to do that. I want to give it time. So this thing that Sri Aurobindo shares, that kind of a detached calm, in the mind, and attentive upward look. It's something which is not very complicated if we are convinced that bahar kuch nahi milega. We are not going to get outside anything, right? So then it is not a very difficult movement to take care of. And whenever we have empty pockets of time, at least in the beginning, we can start there. Whenever we have empty pockets of time, rather than immersing ourselves in the ocean of thoughts and feelings and ruminating and regurgitating about what happened in the morning and what will happen in the evening, usually we are resting in our thoughts and feelings. So rather than resting in our thoughts and feelings, I rest like this. Detached mind, calm in the mind, and attentive to the influence from above. It can be done. And as Shweta was sharing, it is just a matter of practice. And how will I become motivated for practice? Through my life experiences. Through my life experiences, I will become convinced, no, this is important for me. Through this process, I can be of benefit to myself and others. Because it makes me deeply connected with my inner source, or the higher above. So of course it is a long process, but even all the difficult happenings or long processes start from moment to moment. So we don't have to lose these little moments that we have, and continue our practice, no matter how falterly, how much we are faltering on the way, doesn't matter. So it starts always with like 0.5%, then 1%, then 2%. Slowly it becomes our life. So if it is important for us. So so the first half, just reading it again. Always the following two movements, either having quietened the mind to remain attentive to the influence from above. Now, how can I remain stabilized in a state of a quietened mind? Again, it is a gradual process, and slowly through our life experiences, we lose the belief in our thoughts and feelings. We become lesser and lesser sure of them. We know that these are empty bubbles and they are not going to give us anything. So it's easy to then kind of reject it or ignore it, and have a quiet and empty mind, which is kind of a receptacle for the higher influence from above. So only through life experiences we become convinced that uh, mindlessly roaming about in these thoughts and feelings and disturbing emotions and good emotions, it is not giving me anything. I don't want to be here. So we slowly change the taste. So either having quietened the mind to remain attentive to the influence from above. So again, seated above, as if you are, as mother shares, like a solar panel. You are kind of looking above and attentive to the influence, or to separate myself from the calmed mental being and try to realize my existence above the mind. So, a consciousness which is seated beyond the brain lodged consciousness. Usually, we are always in the brain lodged consciousness. What is coming, the sensory input, what are the interpretations of the mind, how am I feeling today, oh, I am so disturbed. Usually round and round and round and round we go in that brain lodged consciousness. But he says that the other possibility is that to even separate myself from the calm mental being and to be seated in the consciousness above the mind, as in the swift experience glimpsed by me once. So, something which may come to us as a random glimpse, like it just happened, and then one can go back to that experience again and again. This mother also shares that this higher experiences may come to us just like that. We may not have really been preparing for it, but once you have a glimpse of it, then you can keep going back to it again and again to maintain a connect, because you saw a kind of a new possibility for yourself. Yeah, so anything here? Anyone?
No, I think to what Shweta was sharing about how this is it feels difficult. I think it's sometimes I feel that one really has to experience the psychic even for a little bit of time, like at least for like 1 minute also, to be in that feeling, to understand how it really feels. It's like being in a very bad company of friends, and then one day you get to spend just 1 hour with a really nice person who is full of grace, and then you come back to the same old lifestyle, and then you see that, then I at least I see that, okay, this is not where I want to be. This is not comfortable anymore. Where I was finding my peace and all, I'm now frustrated in that company. I'm not happy in that company. And um, then I think the questioning starts as to why am I here if this is really so bad? And then I think it becomes, to put it simply, the moment the psychic nature can be felt a little bit, all the, like Sweta was sharing about how this thought, I'm just rephrasing it, how this thought today, it will say that, scold somebody for me. And the next day it vanishes. It's no longer there. So these unfaithful thoughts, at one point it really gets frustrating, and it's not frustrating in like, peaceless way, but it's really annoying that why are these thoughts coming and they don't even stay with me? Then why should I even, host them within, in my mind? And I think that anger, I think it really helps in this progress to connect with the psychic, because you cannot bear any, you cannot take it anymore. So I just wanted to share that.
Yeah, a kind of disgust. Actually, mother talks about it that when a point comes that you are disgusted with your old self, you can't stand it anymore, and that helps to change the taste. Yes. So disgust has a proper place. Yeah. So the second half, if you succeed in shutting out all thought, in reaching absolute passiveness, three things in fact can happen. Either a profound calm descends, takes hold of one, or the consciousness separates from the outer world and attains another level, or lastly, the invasion of outside impressions becomes all powerful. And if the first two are not realized, the third in that case supervenes. Hence, the importance of making all quiet whilst remaining attentive to the higher influence, open towards the heights, so to say. So again, this is something again very practical. We have to experiment with ourselves. We have to try these things, and then we know what are these experiences and have a taste our own self.
At least the invasion part, though, we experience
Yeah,
so
yeah,
regularly. Like, the third one, the invasion, it just catches you. The first two options, no, they feel like home. They feel so familiar, but you don't reach that home. While you read it, you feel like यही तो है मतलब वो इतना it's as if it's there in you in it, but you're not reaching it. But this invasion, though, it just shows like so much to practice.
yeah. Very true. So I think that is why he says that if the first two are not realized, so the first two have to stabilize. As we were talking, that we have to become convinced that we want to spend time here. So slowly with practice, if that becomes stabilized, then actually one can do this, practice this part. He says that hence the importance of making all quiet while remaining attentive to the higher influence. Because in the process of maintaining a quiet, what can happen is that each and every outer impression becomes so dominant that it really kind of becomes frustrating actually, because we are not parallelly, along with making that quiet or silence within, we are not opening upwards to the higher influence. So what we are open to is all the regular kind of impressions that are coming from the outer world, and then they kind of supervene, they become more powerful actually, because there is now a silence in the being, and the being has not yet opened to the high above, to the higher influence, so it is open to all the influences, and that becomes kind of an invasion. And that is why he says that first you have to realize, the first two have to be realized. So we have to have a stabilization there, and then a parallel opening above. Otherwise it can happen that the outer impressions become just too powerful, they are just like, we feel actually as if too much, we can't stand, and then we want to just run away and have some quiet, because they are just invading our being, since there is a better quiet than before. So again, this is very practical experience, and as I said that we have, if we are convinced, we have to experiment and also stabilize this calmness within, like a solid peace within, and parallel opening to the higher influence above. So we can take a little bit more, and then we can see what to do. Yeah, if anyone would like to read, maybe you can take two, maybe all of it. Yes, you can take all of it maybe. So there are now four questions left and their responses. So if anyone would like to read, please go ahead.
No one I can make. Starting from it is difficult, right? It is difficult for me to keep this attitude and this aspiration when I silence my thought, for it is thought which helps me to rouse them. Why? Because you think it is difficult and because you are not used to it, because it is important. Practice this. If your consciousness leaves the physical level, this can itself shut out all sensation. But at any rate, you will have to develop this. Might as well do it now. I suppose these difficulties are common, like the one of the minds of the minds trying by every means to keep its hold upon me. and it tosses me violently hither and thither. Quite common. It would seem easier to overcome the causes of agitation by retiring from the world. It is this feeling which undoubtedly has given rise to the sannyasin's aversion for the world. But I understand that there is another way, that of mental control. Yes, besides the shrunken world in which the sannyasin moves becomes very often a theater of the same difficulties and the same struggles. And it is the smallest things which take on an importance. It is altogether futile to cut oneself off like this. Many have felt it. And an old yogi at Banaras told me that if he could start all over again, he would change his whole method in this way. But he was too old. And those who have thus left the world for a long time can scarcely come back to it. They have lost the faculty, and there is something in them which would not be able to bear it. If we here retire a little from human contact, it is not for the same reason, but mainly in order to avoid the shock and pressure of thoughts of others directed towards us. Is this experience which I am preparing in myself that which has been described as the second birth? Yes, but in this yoga, one must pass through many new births. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, any thoughts? Anyone in the comments? I think this is what we were discussing, that it is difficult, but since it is important, we have to practice if it is important for us, right? So it is very consoling to hear that even for the best of sadhaks, it was very, very difficult. It is difficult for me to keep this attitude, this calmness, and the openness to the influence from above, and this aspiration when I silence my thought, for it is thought which helps me to rouse them. Because you think it is difficult and because you are not used to it, so it's again a matter of changing our habits and developing now new habits which are more beneficial. And he says that, but it is important, practice this. So how can we get rid of older habits? Only when we truly, our own selves, we are convinced that these old habits are now not working for us in a better way. Only then we are able to develop something higher. Otherwise, there is no possibility. Even if, the best of the doctors, we advise us that, eat this and have that. If I am not convinced that the older way of life is now not helping me and the better habits may help me, then I would not be able to be motivated enough to practice, because practice would need some motivation. But if we are convinced that the older ways are not helping, in fact, they are deterring and making life more complicated, then we'll be realizing that yes, it is important, and then we will also be able to practice it and give it lots of time. to this practice. Yeah. So this for moment to moment and from time to time, to kind of shut the doors from all the senses, what I am thinking, feeling, the sensory inputs, and just totally be, as in Gita they share, like a tortoise, and how it just comes fully, all the limbs are inside its shell and no part is visible outside. So they say that like that we should from time to time be in that inner communion, where one must not be giving too much importance to all the sensory input and the interpretation of it and all the feelings and sense perceptions. Usually our life is that, but if we continue always to live in that on that level, then we are not able to be in a conscious touch with our deeper and truer self. So if this is important for us, we will be able to do that. And then he's saying that I suppose these difficulties are common, like the one of the minds trying by every means to keep its hold upon me, and it tosses me violently hither and thither. And he says it is quite common. So to know that these are facts, the challenges are there, and irrespective of the challenges, I will practice because I know that this is important for me. If I'm again convinced. So this, I have also experienced that whenever we become too shut off in our own self and lose our general touch with the world in the name of that, I have to just be like that, then what happens is that we are not able to bear the worldly impacts. So he shares that those who have thus left the world for a long time can scarcely come back to it. They have lost the faculty, and there is something in them which would not be able to bear it. So I remember we once went to a retreat place in Rishikesh long back, and there was this retreat run by a fellow who was a follower of a certain mystic. And he says that I feel, of course, it was a very calm place, serene and beautiful and very quiet. And he said that if I go to the town Rishikesh, the main town, I just can't bear the impact. For me, it's just like mind boggling. I can't take that much of noise. So I think there we also become a kind of, we become narrow basically. We become very limited. So that's what Sri Aurobindo, I feel, I can connect there, that if we become too rigid in following a certain practice and exclude rest of the world, that no, I don't want to, go there and interact there, then we actually become so narrow and we lose, as he says, that we lose the faculty that is able to bear those impacts. So we actually, rather than becoming more strong, we become weaker. So, and he says that this is not what we are doing this in this yoga. In this yoga, we of course from time to time and we continuously develop, stabilize that supramental or that deeper connect, but remaining in the world, not shutting down from the world, because like that we become more powerful. We have that strength that grows within us, that we can bear all the impacts and chaos, and in the middle of all the blabber of the world, we can still continue and do good work. Not that I only need to go to a silent place and there only I find like myself, being myself. Not like that. So I think that this also in integral yoga specifically very, very important. What he shares here, that those who have left the world for a long time can scarcely come back to it. They have lost the faculty, and there is something in them which would not be able to bear it. If we here retire a little from human contact, it is not for the same reason, but mainly in order to avoid the shock and pressure of the thoughts of others directed towards us. So even if we are trying to maintain a kind of a certain purity, to reduce the outer worldly contacts, it is because most of it is unnecessary actually. Most of our interactions with the world are unnecessary, and those impacts actually spoil us, and don't let us kind of have that fence around, which we need in the meantime, so that our trunk like a sapling grows, and while in the meantime when the sapling is growing, it needs a fence around itself, and after some time then it doesn't need it anymore. Yeah. And then of course I think this is also very beautiful, that there is a word called dvij, twice born. That we are born through the biological birth, and then we give birth to ourselves, the spiritual birth. So in scriptural language it is used as dvij in Hindi, which is twice born. So he says that, is this experience which I am preparing in myself that which has been described as the second birth? And he says yes, but in this yoga one must pass through many new births. So I think this is also very, very beautiful, because you cannot stop giving birth to your newer self every time. You keep expanding and expanding and expanding. As Sri Aurobindo says, realization after a new realization, and a greater light after a different light. So light after light and realization after realization. There is no stopping there. So there is no stagnancy at all. And it's a beautiful process of again crossing our older thresholds, older rigidities, and from time to time we do become rigid. We see even in the ashram kind of a community, where you may think that, oh, things are so holy and sacred and good work is happening. Even there we see people who have become stagnant, and very rigid and very strong headed in their opinion, and it's very hard to change them. While I have often find this kind of a contrast, that more often that in ashram surrounding you may find more staunch and very cultish people, while people who are not living in an ashram surrounding and have, like, living just openly in the world, not really belonging to some particular ashram or cult or whatever, they are actually more open minded than the people living in ashram. It happens many a time, because the view becomes very, very narrow. So to know that that view can become narrow, living wherever, and that is where our main work lies. So not to become rigid and dominating and controlling and fixed, because that is death. We die if we become too rigid and stagnant in our ideas and being. Yeah. So any last thoughts or reflections, anyone, before we end today?
Yes. One
Yeah.
thing very unique about Sri Aurobindo Yoga is that Sri Aurobindo, that tells to go through the problem, not around the problem. And like through the problem. When I say that, I mean, you know, like he doesn't say that go up top a mountain and just meditate there, leave the society behind. He tells, like, the process is where I live in the society, yet I am able to, stay in the society, yet also be with my psychic. And I think that's very important, especially after my recent trip. I've come to know that I met an experience I'll share. I met a sadhu behind the Badrinath temple. There's a mountain. He lives there. And he told me that when he was young, he left everything, family members, everything. He lives on the mountain all by himself. He told me that when in his 30s, he had no interest to get married, and he wanted to be a brahmachari, like to have celibacy, to be a celibate. And he said that I had no interest. I I could not relate with any girl, so I was unmarried. And now, so he's around 65 years old, and he says that now I have interest. Now I feel a need for a companion. And I was really shocked because, he was, it felt like he was really, an established sadhu. Like he had that calmness and everything. But then when he said this, I saw a little bit of disturbance in him. And then I noticed that, okay, so this is why it is important that to be in the society for me, I'm talking about myself, and to face through, to go through that challenge versus going around the challenge, because the challenge will eventually come in one way or the other. And since that I'm not connected with it by going away from it, this time I'll be overwhelmed. I will not have that strength to face it. So yeah, wanted to share that. Thank you.
Yeah. So anything more? Anyone before we end? Okay, then let's take a moment of silence to share, dedicate all the goodness with all the numerous, innumerable sentient beings, each wanting happiness. May we all have true happiness and the causes of true happiness, and may we not have suffering, and may all the causes of suffering be taken away from us. May we have all the courage required to go through all the experiences of life, shrinking from none. Yeah. Thank you, everyone.